sponsors. Maybe we better not then go live.
Okay, well.
Damien is going to be here all day on Tuesday. Good morning. It's Friday, February 28th, 2025. And this might just be a glitch real quick. That we're having some technical difficulties or not. You want me to?
We can work it out.
Yeah, no, we can,
Adjourn early.
Perfect. Like, entertain the motion to adjourn. No, there you go. I guess that. Not-
Start.
I actually don't have a copy of. It's on the agenda. The bill either.
No, it's on the agenda.
I do.
It's on the webpage.
So originally, but I
Okay.
will say originally, to be able, so originally this morning's agenda was supposed to be Agency of Community and or ACCD was coming in to talk about the level 1 and level 2 charger money that we are collecting from the EV registration fee. And that is destined towards build out of level 1 and level 2s in multi-dwelling and commercial multi-dwellings and commercial workplaces. There is an issue with that piece, and we've now had them on the schedule. This is the second time we've had to reschedule. They're not available and whatnot. So that is now being reworked to try to be the Wednesday morning after our break. So we have to have that testimony before we can finish the T-bill, because there is an issue related to that potentially estimated $1.4 million and where it needs to go. And we've heard testimony from the CFO at the agency about a special fund or not a special fund. That's a policy decision we're going to need to make. And we're going to need to hear where ACCD is at with the planned use of that money. So that is now trying to be scheduled for the third time for the Wednesday after we get back. So Tuesday, when we get back on Tuesday, we will go through the T-bill immediately with Ledge Council. And then Ledge Council will walk us through the bill that we're going to be talking about this morning. So we've had to revamp the schedule today because of illnesses and people being out. And what we're still going to decide on the ACCD. We got to find out where they're at. We got to decide, I lost my train there, about these special fee or fund or not, whether we're going to go in that direction or not. So that'll be Wednesday morning, hopefully. And then for today, as we heard this morning, I believe, there's now a bill number H426, which 4 of our members have sponsored. And like we had talked about with the bills that are on the wall, I think it's not on the wall or about to be on the wall. And we are inviting them in to present at least their bill, their intent of their bill, highlight the sections that they would like to, and tell us about what they've been up to or what their bill purpose is and where it's headed. So then on Tuesday, our council will actually walk through the bill for the committee.
And can I add something to it? So the bill has really 4 or 5 primary folks that have worked on it. We each have sections that we've added in there, and we can go over it section by section. I think some we may not even bother talking about, and that we're not pushing,
Yes.
specifically for some items, but others we're looking at sections that could potentially go in the T-bill or potentially in the DMV bill. So.
And I think that from what I understand is the changes that are happening almost daily on a federal issue.
I was gonna say.
Is what we also are struggling with our mileage-based use funding, are all sort of intersecting at the time. So as far as cancellation of the original plan of agenda for this morning, combined with those federal changes, combined with the bill finally getting out of the backlog of amount of bills that we've seen drop in the last week, that kind of puts us into this spot to give you that chance to. So that's part of the reason that I guess you'll also work with Ledge Council onto what you may or may not want them to present on
Yeah, I think
the
based on what we
Tuesday after
talked
we get
about
back.
today, we'll focus more on those sections.
Representative Burke and Representative Pouch.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to be here, I can, because we'll be going back and forth. So I want to emphasize that it's a constantly shifting landscape. So that's why there's just a lot of confusion going on, and things that were ideas maybe in the fall or right before session started now seem to be sort of impossibilities. So that's why some of the bill has some things in it that we won't be in it, but other things, I think we would like to discuss as possibilities to see how the committee feels about it. And then, of course, there's the funding question. So I'll just go back to my seat because if we're going to go section by section, then doesn't make sense. So
Section next.
We're gonna, the next council will walk us through the entire fees.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
and I think we don't even have
highlights
to
of
go
what
through
you-
the entire.
But you have as much time as you like,
Yeah.
for, well, you don't have as much
Okay.
time as you'd like, but you have at least 45 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to start.
Well,
Oh,
I
sorry.
just highlight
I'm
something.
sorry.
So, I just want, if we're going through kind of the high level, it seems like it might also be useful to have feedback of if there are particular areas that might be useful to have more testimony on. Some areas we've had testimony on, some we haven't, so.
So my perception of what I would like to see is that if we invite any presenter of any bill or any sponsor of any bill to come in, and we generally give them 10 to 15 minutes, and there's 4 of you, your 10 to 15 minutes is 45 minutes, and you can use it however you'd like to present why the committee would want to, consider the bill, and then you can go into any level of depth that you want.
It's just 5-minute drive-bys.
Well, if you were sitting here, you'd say 5-minute drive-by, but I'm saying 10 to 15 minutes. Because then I can't hear myself.
You just want to hear what would be like preferences, you know?
Yeah.
And if we need further testimony, we can discuss that later, right?
Yep,
Okay,
your 10
All right.
minutes apiece.
all right. So I
Or
can be
separately
pretty
together
quick.
to do whatever, your
Section.
5 minutes together, your 10 minutes.
I'll be pretty quick.
These are like 5-minute drive-bys. I mean, they're a little bit long.
This is a 45.
But that's what historic.
But we had this amazing opening due to a cancellation.
And now
Mr.
you wait
Chair,
10 minutes.
much time, I appreciate it very much. I think, I'm going by the draft I have, but section 2 put in appropriations for different vehicle incentive programs. I have a very strong feeling for our vehicle incentive programs. Was there at the beginning when we instituted them. They've been very successful. They've helped people get into lower cost transportation options, helped our economy, helped our auto dealers sell cars, and et cetera. Help low income people, but also low and moderate income people, because transportation burden is, as we know, is very high relative to household income. So in looking at this, our proposal originally was like for 6 million for the PEV program and, $1 million for the replace your ride and 3 million for Mileage Smart. And in looking at all the landscape of the funding, I would like to advocate for $3 million just for the Mileage Smart program. And I'll give my rationale. The Mileage Smart program serves the very, very lowest income people, pays a quarter of the price of a vehicle, of a used fuel efficient vehicle, not necessarily EV or plug-in hybrid. And it's, I think that we have had some really good testimony it came out of Capstone Community Action. Sue Minter instituted this program, former transportation secretary. And I think it's a really, really good program. And I would, in the interest of the affordability, that is the sort of word that we're all thinking about for this session, in the helping transportation is important for people to get to work, mainly, and get for groceries and get the kids to school, et cetera. So I would like to propose that we include that. And I don't know where the money would come from at this point, but that's just a priority for me. Okay. And I think
I'll do section 4.
Representative Tomlinson,
Oh.
you're next on this list of one-time public transit money.
Sure, I can speak to that. This section aims to ensure maintaining the existing level of service for transit. And so it proposed flat funding from 2025 to fiscal year 26. Currently, our public transit budget has been cut by 10%. That's what this section speaks to.
All right. Section 4, this is the retail delivery fee. We, the last couple of years, we all know about the transportation budget and challenges. The MBUF is one we think, we want to move forward with. this retail delivery fee. I think also has some good, it's good policy. And what I would like us to do, we got an overview of it, the possibilities of it as compared to other funding sources. And what I'd like to do is to sugar it out a little bit more and ask the Agency of Transportation, V-Trans, to put some detail on how exactly this would work, what the impact would be to the process of collecting the fees, and so that it's sort of teed up for our next session. So it's, you know, if we choose to move forward, it's ready to go, because it's really not ready to go now. So that's what section 4 is. That's what I'd like us to do. Section 5 says, hey, we should use those fees for municipalities, but I think we can just wait on where the money goes. Maybe it just goes to the T fund. But I think, you know, getting that policy, sugaring it out and being ready to move forward with it if we choose to do so in the next session. So that would be section 4 and 5. Section,
Okay, so
yes,
I just have a question. So is section 5, you're saying, because my section 5 that's been posted is appropriation for state aid for highways.
yeah, that would be, let me pull it up.
The idea that any, sorry, it was my understanding,
Yeah.
maybe I should rephrase it in a question. My understanding of any revenue that you generate from the retail delivery fee, the reason it says town highway aid is you would like to direct that money potentially to town municipalities and towns, money specifically generated from retail delivery fee would go. That's why
Well,
it's titled.
Yeah.
That's why it would
Yeah.
be titled that way.
So, and you know, while I think that's a good use for it, and it sort of fits in with the impact of deliveries to rural roads, we can hold off on it. And, you know, I think we really explore the possible delivery fee going forward.
And Representative Pouch, you're asking potentially if the agency, in effect, you said queue it up, I guess, make sure that
Yes.
we would be, and what they would need to do to get ready to implement. and
Yes,
make
sort of finalize some of the details, like, you know, there are exemptions. What exactly are those exemptions? You know,
That would-
the process of actually collecting the fees and a timing to do the whole thing.
And that would involve the tax commissioner in some way.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah. Section 6, I don't think we want to talk about. Section
But
7,
we'll still have to have our legislative
Yeah,
council
yeah.
at least highlight it. I can do that.
Section 7, that's you, Molly, right?
Yeah, section 7 is expansion of PEV and UBEC market. It's basically to send funds to Drive Electric Vermont to provide education outreach services related to the successful ownership and operation of PEVs. So Drive Electric Vermont has received funding from the state. They received some money before to do when we put in a few years ago anyway to help with the programs. And we heard from Dave Roberts asking for 500,000 for their program. My understanding is that with half of that amount, they could do some education outreach, whether or not we're going to have a vehicle incentive program. There can, you know, help people who already have EVs or who are considering buying one, whether that's with an incentive or not, to, you know, what are the ins and outs? How can you learn how to use one? How can you feel comfortable buying one? So I would just, I think that Drive Electric Vermont is a really fabulous asset to the state, and I would like to send some money their way. My proposal is $250,000.
All right, I guess I am up next to talk about vehicle miles traveled. So right now, transportation decisions that the AOT that inform investment and policy making is they use something called level of service. And vehicle miles traveled is an alternative approach that takes into account all users in a way that is a little harder to do when you have the level of service. And it seems to me that we have just updated our land use regulations in a very significantly. We want to focus housing in centers that are walkable, served by transit. And the goal is to provide housing that people can afford for our workforce, grow the grand list, have more businesses, all this stuff. And so it's very important that we make it easier for towns to build walking and biking infrastructure. And we all know that that is extremely expensive and that we're not able to meet the demand. So this is a shift in the metrics that the AOT would use. And this could be something that only applies in designated areas per the RPC mapping that is going on. But it would in coordination with the Vermont state standards, which are underway, it would sort of shift the focus to prioritizing walkable, bikeable, transit served, accessible, and I hope the topic for further in the bill, curbside EV charging kinds of environments, and I think that future approach could be extremely beneficial for our state. It would provide locational efficiencies that make a lot of costly services much more cost effective and easier to deliver, for example, including things like education and daycare and healthcare. So that is what it is. And again, I think the timing is important given the coordination with the land use. But also looking farther out, we've taken some testimony about those of us who have trains that run through their villages. And right now we have big 18-wheelers going through our villages, that could be opportunities to shift some of that freight to rail. And so I think it's just part of a holistic approach to moving us in a direction that I think there is some general agreement among Vermonters that it would be good to move in.
So that incorporates several sections, right?
Yes, that was
Yeah.
10,
Eight.
11,
Yeah.
and I think,
8, 9,
yeah,
10,
8, 9,
11.
10, 11, yeah. Okay.
The next three sections, I'll speak to it, but I wasn't necessarily sponsoring it, is an attempt to help municipalities with matching funds. And I think the point being, rural towns, sometimes it's difficult for them to make the matching fund to get grants. And also the first one there is response to disasters, the matching fund required for some of that. So it's really just a look at the matching fund requirements for grants from the state, and recognizing that some rural towns may be really challenged with that. That goes through 14, 15, and 16. It's back to you, Kate.
Yeah, I think I more or less kind of covered that, just to tie it in with the land use planning that is going on. And then
I'm sorry.
can I, Phil, I'll
Go ahead.
just pop down to 17, just
Sure.
moving along. We had some testimony yesterday about the challenges that the compliance with federal historic preservation laws, that creates a lot of expenses and administrative burden for our towns who are just trying to, build a simple segment of sidewalk. I think the example was used that, you know, the 39,000 to build something in Patty's town and 500,000 in somewhere else that, you know, it's real money, which, you know, is in short supply. And then I can also tackle the speed limits one. Yeah. So speed is really the defining factor in how comfortable and productive a walkable environment can be. And you know, we have this would provide, again, more flexibility for communities to be self-determining about the kinds of future built environments that they want to have for whatever their goals are. And I think many places would want places that are safe for all ages, but also places that invite economic productivity and you know, develop that grand list value that, you know, beefs up property values.
So that was section 18. Basically, it's a policy to allow less restrictions on municipalities to set speed limits on roads. Today, there's a whole process that you have to go through. Then
Yeah, and then
19,
yeah,
Yeah.
just coordinate with what the regional planning mapping that's going on. We had some testimony on what they're doing yesterday. But you know, the idea is a much finer grained approach to that shows I think reveals the latent value in the settings that our village and downtown settings that many of us have in our towns. And it makes it easier for local select boards to leverage that value.
all right, I'll speak to 20 through 23. I didn't sort of champion this, but basically, the first three are policies to ensure renters, members of common interest communities, and members of HOA associations have some leverage to install, make it easier to install electric chargers. So
What section is that for?
those are,
20 to 22.
yeah, 20 through 22.
I'm sorry, is that? I apologize for not knowing.
No.
Was somebody talking to me about this, a right to charge?
That's kind of, yeah,
Is that what
I
we're
think
talking about?
that's been used as a,
That term sorts of, I don't know what it all means. Does it
yeah,
bring the
I
word
don't
up?
use it, but yeah, go
Okay,
ahead,
'cause-
yeah,
You're talking about if people rent, they don't own the building, they can't
right,
do work on the building without permission of
right,
of the owner of the building.
right,
And you're trying to do something to make it more incentivized or to make that happen, to make them be able to use, to have electric
Yeah.
cars.
like I
I
said,
don't know
I'm
exactly
not
what it is.
championing
I'm
this,
not, and I'm
but
not
it's
asking,
not-
I'm just,
yeah,
I'm curious if this is what I'm getting emails on this thing of right to charge, and
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it yet, and I'm wondering if this is
right.
language geared towards that concept.
Yeah, I personally don't use that, but it's like, hey, you know, working with
Property owner.
property owners and or HOAs and or these community associations to set up, here's a process to get that done. Doesn't necessarily force anybody to, you know, a property owner to pay for it, but it's like, here's the process. So I think this one, Damien could probably provide more detail.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it involves preemption, right? So right now, for example, you can have, it's allowed under zoning to have have chickens in your backyard, but your HOA can prevent it from happening.
We're not doing the
Yeah.
deep dive
Yeah.
of it
Right.
right now, I just looking for a higher level
Yeah.
question of, is that what this is, mean
That's the
mean something
concept.
else?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Representative
Does it, if the owner of the building doesn't want it there, period? Does that have some enforcement or something
I
on it?
don't believe so, but I'd have Damien, like I said, I'm not
So
championing
he'll-
this.
When we
Yeah,
hit it on
Damien.
Tuesday when we get back.
I'll walk you through the details. It would take more than just a minute or two to explain. There are some. There was a version of this in the Senate last year, which I was also the attorney for, so. And it's a pretty detailed piece, but essentially what it is it creates circumstances in which the equipment must be installed. It does also have provisions in there requiring the tenant to cover costs of installation and removal. Et cetera. So there's more to it. And
And we're not, yeah, I'm not trying to solve it
Yeah.
today. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm trying
Yeah.
to stay at that.
this is
level.
what.
This is what is somewhat at least proposed, and you're gonna get it into the detail when it
And
comes
this
back.
is what folks are colloquially calling right to charge, even though it's not an absolute right to install this equipment.
I think Representative Couch, I'll try to join you
I
in
was
not
pretty
using
close.
that term.
Yeah. No, but that's all right. I'm glad I think
You have
I.
another, you have any more?
Yeah.
So,
The next one is section 23, and this is a policy just to ensure that credit cards can be used on public chargers. I don't know, again, I didn't champion this. I don't know how big of a problem it is, but public chargers, you have ChargePoint, you have different companies that have them. And if you don't have the app, it can be difficult to use a charge card. So the idea is if it's public charging, you don't need to have a special app.
Credit card.
you
I
guys
just
are,
want to add to that is that this section came from a suggestion from former member Mary Sullivan. Who's encountered problems. So just a little addendum.
6 years ago. So I consider, I guess, that in a way, the four of you as co-sponsors sort of have the floor and the rest of us are asking questions as it comes up. Would be the way I guess I would
Thanks.
view it. I'm sorry. So you don't have to raise your hand, Representative Burke and Representative Tomlinson,
Okay.
Representative Lally, Representative Pouch, you're presenting your bill and the four of you have the floor. And if there's other questions, we'll keep interjecting or asking it.
Section 24, Kate?
Okay, so this would be a policy to use state right of ways for public charging and just make it something that is just easier to happen. We took some testimony earlier this week learning about, the value of three-phase power or even two-phase power, and how that it creates access to electrical access to have electrical charged infrastructure of whatever type including your vehicles in your home. So it seems like, the three-phase places, state highways with three-phase power are kind of an opportunity hiding in plain sight that we are not making as much use of as we could. It would be interesting to investigate the sort of ancillary benefits that making it easier to provide three-phase charging in downtowns, for example, or even village centers like mine. We have three-phase power on Route 7, would provide. Right now, you have to go to a parking lot, at our municipal building, but, what if we could have a main street that allowed three-phase parking in conjunction with, pull in or parallel parking, for example.
Representative White has a question for you guys.
So, I'm just thinking about the EV charging that's set up on, is that Baldwin Street? Close to the State House. Is that kind of what you're envisioning? Am I pointing the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it could be different for whatever the context is, and we're going to have this guidance coming our way that will really provide that flexibility to do it for whatever makes sense in the context. Some of us have really narrow right of ways in our villages where it's, we're gonna have to come up with different approaches. But there are other places, I'm thinking of, like Castleton, for example, which has this great big wide Main Street, and I think they have accommodating pool and parking right now in front of a couple of their little stores, it seems, I don't know if they have three-phase power there, but let's pretend that they do. That could be a great spot to have a couple of EV chargers. Yeah.
The next section, let's see where are we here? Yep, so section 25, this is the basic policies around bicycle use around intersections. So to allow a bicycler to hit the button, to use the crosswalk, and other ways to make it safer and easier for bicyclists to navigate intersections. I spoke with ex-chair Cochran about this, and we thought this might be best put into the DMV bill. That way we have a little more time to work through the details and get a little more testimony. But so, it's written up. We'll get the specifics from Damien on the following Tuesday. But that's what that is, section 25. And we had a presentation, a testimony on it. I think we'll need a little bit more, maybe from public safety and the Agency of Transportation. And so it'll take a little bit of time. The next one, section 26, was my hope to add more funding for municipal highway stormwater mitigation. But we're already discussing, getting those funds into a sort of index so that they can slowly increase in time. And so I think that I'd be satisfied with that for now. I think since there's so little money to find anywhere in the budget.
Curious, how did you come up with 7,143,000? Right now, like 7, 8.
I split up, yeah.
Just,
So,
There's a certain
Yeah.
project in a certain
Yeah.
town. that
Yeah.
comes with a
Yeah.
143.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that not
Good
appropriate?
question. No. That's a good question.
Well, it's Friday, we're all gonna
Those
have.
are numbers, guys.
It's Friday.
And then the last section, 27, is having the Agency of Transportation Public Transit, like Ross's group, pick 3 districts in the state that are varied, a very rural one, a sort of middle one, maybe a larger one in a more urban area, and do a deep dive on their education, transportation, and take a look at, put those measurements of efficiency, passenger per mile cost, and so we can compare it to public transportation, just to see what the numbers are. And also take a look at, what we've done in the past, what studies we've done in the past, and other things that are being done to see if there is any opportunity there to get some efficiency between public transit and education transportation.
And there is a very good study that was done, and I think some school districts are even, using it in particular ways, so that would be part of it.
So, maybe the minimum we find out is here's how it can be done, and districts and towns could look at. So, and it would be nice to just sort of see what the costs are so that, depending on where they are, it might cause us to look for more opportunities.
Representative White.
So this is kind of what we've talked about in committee in terms of trying to look at efficiencies between school bus transportation and public transportation. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I didn't realize this was in this, and I had a conversation with Patrick Murphy yesterday about the same thing, and he suggested maybe looking at a study and was going to reach out to Ross McDonald as well. So
Yeah, and I had mentioned it to Ross
Okay.
briefly, and he didn't push back on it anyways.
Okay.
Representative Casey.
So you got a ballpark of how much this is all gonna cost?
We'll
Study this particular.
No, this whole thing, this,
Well, the majority of the positions that we are proposing are policy positions, so there wouldn't be any
there's some money though.
cost associated. Yeah, well, it would,
Well, there would be the 3 million for Mileage Smart. There'd be, this is all potential, obviously, 250,000 for Drive Electric. And there's one more thing that didn't get on this list, section 28. And that is, I think I've mentioned this before, and I found out that this program about training new Americans to purchase vehicles as an economic development. I looked at the representative employee at the United Way program, and that's actually, and I talked to the person who's proposing this. That's about having people keep jobs. This is about helping people to buy cars, very specifically targeting. They're asking for $15,000. I have a sheet, information sheet on it that I can. I doubt I may have given a couple of you that sheet. Anyway, it's the Capstone Community Action did some workshops to teach people about New Americans, how you buy a car, how you get financing, etc. What you should look for. And they were been very successful, and they had them in restaurants run by New Americans in, I think, in Central Vermont. And now the Central Vermont Economic Development Organization, run by Melissa Bounty, is looking to continue and have, because the Capstone finally has run out, looking to run 2 more workshops for $15,000. That's the ask. And we can get her to come in, or we can get Patty Coleman to come in, who's working with her on that.
Okay, I'd also, on the question that he had, Representative Casey had in there is the $7 million for stormwater mitigation.
Which I said.
Right.
Push
So we don't
out,
have,
yeah.
right, simply,
Right.
there's also the retail delivery fee that would actually potentially generate revenue as opposed to spend revenue. I would say we don't have a fiscal note, we don't have a policy spot, and it's a work in progress, I guess, at this point, but there's pieces and parts that, so I don't know the answer to that, but I'm not sure that they know the answer to that at this point either, I guess, you want to comment to that? Please, it's yours, Representative Burke.
I forgot. What we need to do, there was a proposal to use some of the Reggie money for incentive programs, and I would like to investigate whether that would be an option to use 3 million of Reggie money. That's only money that's over what they need for their programs, to use that for Mileage Smart. That would be one possibility.
Did you want to go again on that, or did you represent what?
I just have a question on kind of policy. So we'll dig into the details of this when we come back, it sounds like, but is this kind of an all or nothing? Or are we looking at we can kind of pick and choose as a committee which ones feel appropriate?
Whatever the committee,
Yeah.
it'll be a committee decision, obviously, to go into the detail. Thank you.
Yeah.
So these are proposals.
Yeah.
And I personally feel like, we get proposals from the administration, and those are administration proposals. Our job is to make other proposals. We don't have to so we're not just rubber stamping them, and that's our job. We're a different branch of government. And so I feel like it's very important to put forth, to look at their proposals and look at our proposals and see where we might match up or not, whatever. So that's.
And I would say at least a couple of items specifically that, I'm like looking at and trying to get in here. We've had studies in previous last session, on bicycle safety around intersections, on possible funding things. So I'm trying to, so based on those studies, let's maybe move them forward if they seem appropriate.
Representative Coy had a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, so are you finished?
I had one more question, but I
I'm
can-
sorry.
Okay, no,
It's still your floor if I
Okay,
didn't interpret
okay.
that you were done. I'm sorry.
One more question, Representative Lally, I heard you say something about trying to incentivize trucks to use more rail, which I think is a great idea. And I'm just wondering if you had thought about putting like kind of tax breaks, like, you know, how do we financially incentivize a switch like that? Because there's such a crazy savings in terms of emissions when you go to rail, and also, you know, less disruption in town centers. So, you know, tax incentives of some sort to encourage that switch from trucking to rail.
You know, this might be a topic where some more study would be helpful, because apparently one of the, as I know, just this, what I've heard is that you need sort of depots to be able to get the stuff off the rail and then the stuff onto the trucks. So, you know, and those are in short supply. That being said, there are, it is believed that is, you know, would be some opportunities for that. And it could be some great rural jobs in some locations in Vermont. So, it's, you know, it's just another way of like how we can kind of wrap transportation into how we land use, economic development, you know, instead of looking at these things kind of in isolation as the economy changes and if, you know, to meet emerging needs. So, so if you were able to get, I can speak from the position of representing Shelburne, if you were able to get some of the many 18-wheelers that we now have going through our village, you know, off the village streets, you know, that would highlight the potential of the Route 7 corridor in our village for economic development opportunities. And my town is exactly trying to do that right now. You know, we have the top 3 tourism venues in the state. You know, we're interested in maybe looking to see if we could have a hotel that could come to our town, things like that, you know, because that's kind of key to keeping investment in your town. People like to eat where they are staying and, you know, so, but if you have 18-wheelers going through your village, that's, you know, that diminishes the appeal of that. So yeah, so we're eager to kind of think about how could we do things differently. And that, you're right, it would reduce emissions drastically, which might make it, you know, the whole clean truck thing a little less of a, you know, a sort of a challenge that we're trying to understand right now, if we could have more flexible approaches. And there's also kind of a movement that is happening where this is something that is happening in bigger places, in cities, and it is incentivizing a move to smaller delivery trucks, you know, which again would be kind of more right-sized to our community. So, you know, apples and oranges in our very rural context, but everything's changing and it's worth thinking for the long term, I think.
And the one other thing I like about that is taking pressure off of our roads as we look at our paving challenges.
Oh, forgot about that. Yes.
You know, to get the truck traffic off the road and onto the rail, which, you know, seems to be in pretty good shape. Finish, thank you.
So I just had a couple of questions on the education transportation cost study. So are you envisioning our busing, public transportation busing, to study how they could possibly provide that service?
Yeah, I think one, just sort of looking at what the costs are. So, and I think that might steer us to saying, hey, what else can we do here? And also ask our public transportation to what is being done. You know, there was a previous study. How does that, let's take a look at that. And then what is being done by some of our public transportation, you know, what's being done right now. We've heard some testimony about it being done. And, what opportunities are there? And if they're significant, I mean, we gotta bring in, we have to talk to the education chair, that maybe we'll have something we can help.
Right,
And
so I'm trying to envision, just in Pulteney, like, we have 4 buses, P1 through P4. So there's 4 different sections of towns the school buses go out on. And we have the one bus that comes from Rutland through Castleton, Fairhaven to Pulteney twice a day. So I'm trying to envision, do they have the capacity for the 28 communities? And I know Pulteney needs 4 of them from, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. How that works. I mean, I think it's a great tool, maybe for Burlington, South Burlington, because they have a municipal system already going, and maybe they could add more lines and which provide service to not only the school children, but people trying to get to work. But I'm just trying to envision the cost for a rural municipality. I think it's a great idea to study it.
Yeah,
Just depending
I
on what
envision
the
it
cost is to study.
potentially going both ways. So you might have an education district who says, let's get rid of these buses, make them public buses. They pick up the kids and at the same time, maybe expand their route just a little bit to bring people into town, or like in Heinsberg, we got people in town who want to get on the public transportation, but if they have to get in their car and drive 3 miles or 2 miles to get there,
I mean,
they might as well just keep
New
driving.
York City kids take the subway to school.
And
Right.
I don't know if they do anymore.
While you were
but
out.
they used to.
there was testimony in this area. We took some testimony and we had some students in representing wide range, the whole piece and whatnot. So,
Okay, yeah,
Um,
that's a good thing to say.
Representative Cage.
Back to the trucking thing there. When you sit there and you're taking bigger trucks and offloading stuff to smaller trucks, I can't see where that's real convenient for Hannaford and all them. And I would think the people that live in rural areas or urban areas should realize that they're eating food. I mean, I don't know how much more you want to pay for it, but you gotta have somebody offload the trains or offload whatever you want to do off to smaller trucks. It sounds like there's some offloading going on. That's gonna be expensive. I don't see where that's. Not to step back a little bit, but that's what's on the tip of my tongue there, and it doesn't sound very cost effective.
I can't answer that.
Just-
That's part of the discussion of the proposal.
That would be something to study, because, I mean, that's the challenge with Vermont is,
Yeah.
everything has to be really right for the given context. And we have a lot of different challenges with that. So this would be, understanding what are some of the opportunities that might be there that we are overlooking.
Well, I just don't think it'd be cheaper, even if you do a study. I don't see how you can make it any cheaper to offload something onto another truck and bring it to a store. Your study's gonna find that it costs more, I would say, on that particular aspect. Maybe you might have some, might be some good to it, but it sounds more labor intensive to me. I mean,
Well, in my district.
We're not gonna decide it today.
we won't, yeah.
Representative Wells, you're up.
Yeah, just a few comments off and on here. One man's opinion. Love all the talk about rail, because 3 18-wheelers loads can fit into one rail car. So that's a tremendous savings there. I don't know why we haven't done it before. Some of the other ideas make perfect sense. Push button, bikes at the crosswalk, stuff like that. It's pretty much common sense as far as that goes. Some of them I feel not so much though. I can even look at the GMT with Clayton Clark the other day. It sounded like he was making a sincere effort to restructure. It's 3 years late, but I even look at GMT a little bit different now, because I think they got a plan now and I can implement from there. Curbside charging, stuff like that. Great idea. Cars are coming, no doubt about it. I mean, you got to have the infrastructure. I didn't like the section 22, I think it was, where you have apartment orders, stuff like that, forced to install chargers and stuff, and then making them pay for it too. That doesn't sound kosher.
we'll get.
As far as that
details.
goes.
Yeah, listen.
Yeah, just to, no, I'm almost certain it requires the tenant to pay for it, but we could
Yeah,
get into that in more detail.
and if he doesn't want it, it seems unjust, but.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay. And then, of course, one of my personal pet peeves, the incentives. I think we need Matt Corder and Bill Smith back in here, especially Corder, to clarify how much they really do. And then, of course, the other one, which is anybody who buys a car, I sold cars for a while. Anybody who buys a car, you come in to buy a car, they'll give you all the information you want, how to finance, what car is best for you, etc. So to put $250,000 into a program to trade them how to buy a car sounds a little wild to me. And even though it's only $15K to train new Americans, just go to the dealer. And if you're going to buy an electric car or combustion engine, they're going to tell you everything you want to know. They'll show you how to finance. They have people for that. Sounds like a monumental waste of cash flow. And if we're going to just toss cash out, let's just give it to a United Way. That's all I got.
Okay, Representative Pouch, you want to sum up?
Yeah, I was sort of, first of all, apologize that this comes at the last minute. You know, So it.
Wasn't your doing?
There was some delays and things, so apologize for that, and it seems kind of haphazard. I think we'll get a review of it. I think we've identified some that we think, have some merit to move forward. I appreciate everybody with an open mind and, listening to it, so.
Thank you very much. I'd like to add a few comments piece in terms of Representative Burke had kind of highlighted on the idea that the original budget comes from the administration, and that's how it's always been, it's how it's required to be done in Vermont. That's how it's required to be done in the whole scenario. And then we have our chance, and then bills that come up and people are asking, this is one of those efforts of proposals that may or may not, as the committee works through, to be included. That there's no difference than any other piece, but that highlighting that part, we start with the governor's recommend, and now it's an opportunity for you to make proposals to choose to be just like these people, these sponsors that want us to consider their bills. Because there's 4 members in the committee that are sponsoring the bill, and we had a cancellation, they got a spot to slide into, be into that spot. So everybody has the opportunity in this body to make proposals that may or may not get to the wall for us to try and consider. So that is the process, that part. I certainly will, that's my job to try to make sure that does happen. And that's where we're at. Specifically to a couple of things that I have learned on the part of the public transit. There has been multiple studies, including one most recently about how Mount Mansfield in particular would work with public transit, et cetera. So there needs to be continued interaction with the agency on what they have done so far. And I didn't realize this, and I'm hoping I'll hear more about this, that there are some level of public transit activity going on with schools in over 40 different locations in Vermont. So these conversations, these proposals, these bills, this work that you do, the finding of additional information, I'm learning, everybody learns as going through the process. It may or may not end up in our bill, but I didn't realize that there's public and busing for schools and public transit going on in over 40 different locations in Vermont. So there may be a lot of learning that can be done for other locations. The agency will be very tied up in public transit services related to rural transit services for a while now, and that'll queue us up to our next guest, potentially our next witness that we'd like to welcome up to the witness stand. Caleb, thank you for joining us today, and I'm sure there's plenty of questions in the direction, and from flowing from the last section or the second to last section of that bill proposal, not our transportation bill, but to our rural community transportation company and partner to the agency in different areas. So I guess we're going to learn a lot more about what you do and what might be coming down the pipe, I believe. So welcome.
That's great. Thank you. My name is Caleb Grant. I'm the Executive Director of Rural Community Transportation, serving Caledonia, Essex, Orleans, and Lamoille counties.
I think given that where you're at and where you might be headed, I think also, in case you make sure you already know, if you didn't, we're going to introduce ourselves, that I now offer and serve from Swanton and represent the people of Swanton and Shelton.
Tim Quirk, I'm from Bennington.
Pete Lally from Shelburne.
Lily Burke, Brattleboro.
Chloe Tomlinson from Livingston.
Jimmy Casey, Hubbard.
Patty McCoy representing Pulteney, Ira, and a portion of Wells.
Chris Keyser, Rutland.
Candace White from Whitesfield.
Nice to see you in person, Caleb. We spoke Monday, Ken Wells, Orleans County.
Thank you.
And Phil Hodge, Heinsberg.
Oh. So I was originally invited, this is a reschedule for NEK Advocacy Day. So I do have a prepared testimony on behalf of the Northeast Kingdom. I do know you have a number of pressing questions, so I'm happy to submit that in writing for the record, or I'm happy to share that with you now, or we can hop right into questions.
We have a half an hour to go in a couple different directions. I know there's interest in the rural transit and in the NEK piece that didn't happen. So thank you for reminding me of that portion. So we're ready to go wherever you'd like to go for the next half hour.
Okay.
Let's represent Powell.
And just so you guys are part of Vermont Public Transit Association, right, within that group?
We are. I'm the vice president of VPTA.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So rural community transportation, if you're not familiar, annually applies to be the regional transportation providers for the 4 counties we represent. We have fixed route on demand is the largest portion of our services. About 60% of the services we provide are under the Medicaid contract. Where are the largest provider of Medicaid transportation. On any given week, we'll give about 1,200 to 1,500 on-demand rides for Medicaid. We also have 2 microtransit systems, one in the Morrisville area as well as the Newport area. And I'm here today to not just share the successes, but the very real challenges we face in providing transportation to one of the most beautiful, but also one of the most rural and underserved parts of our state. The good news is we're making a lot of progress and a real difference in our communities. The not so good news is that we need your help to keep it going and ensure that all Vermonters, no matter where they live, have access to services they need to live a full, healthy life. Let's start with the bright spots. At RCT, we've been able to create something that makes a real difference in the lives of our neighbors. In the region where distances seem endless, we've built a transportation system that gets people to where they need to go. Doctor's appointments, jobs, education, groceries, and social connection. The power of what we do is not just in miles driven, but in the lives touched. We've seen firsthand how a ride to a doctor's office can make the difference between life and death, how getting to work on time can make the difference between stability and financial hardship for others. We're proud of our growth in demand response services, making sure that no one in our communities is left behind. What truly sets us apart is our ability to serve even the most remote areas. We've created a network that brings people together, whether it's shuttles, volunteer drivers, or our partnerships with local organizations. We're not just moving people from A to B, we're connecting people to opportunities, to health, to community. This is why we exist. But as you well know, growth comes with a set of new challenges. We are seeing more demand for our services than ever before, and while that's a positive sign, it's also putting a strain on our ability to meet the demands of our communities. As a result, we're facing some tough obstacles. One of our biggest challenges is the driver experience. We rely on an incredible group of people who dedicate their lives to the work, but the emotional and physical demands are high. Many of our riders are dealing with complex health issues, mental health challenges and chronic illnesses, mobility issues, and sometimes this leads to difficult interactions. For example, riders may be frustrated, anxious, or in pain, or can result in behaviors that are hard to manage. Our drivers are the heart of what we do, but the emotional toll of managing these situations can lead to burnout and frustration. We want to do everything we can to support our drivers and give them the tools they can handle these situations while feeling safe and valued in their jobs. Without that support, we risk of losing the very people who are keeping this system running. Here's where the rubber really meets the road, both figuratively and literally, is we're seeing an explosion in the demand services, and the more people who need transportation, the more vehicles we need, the more drivers we need, the more maintenance we need, and of course, the more funding we need. Our budget is feeling squeezed, and we try to meet the increased demand. So my request to you is to advocate with your colleagues to consider the impacts in transportation as they build solutions. I'm confident in the state of Vermont and our leaders. I believe we will build housing. but where that housing is built can put an enormous financial strain on regional transportation providers. I believe that we will find a path forward to addressing property taxes and providing exceptional education to our youth in the state. But where and how we educate our students can challenge our transportation system. Mental health, childcare, flood resilience, healthcare, name any of the challenges you're tackling today, and I can share with you the externalized costs that are going to be asked to be absorbed by our transportation providers. I do not believe this is intentional, but it is very real, and it demands that we are intentional about discussing transportation within every solution. Together, we can build a transportation system that works for everyone. Let's keep moving forward, and not by expanding services, but by making sure that every Vermont community, no matter how remote, can access the opportunities in healthcare and connections they deserve. Thank you.
Representative McCoy?
Thanks for being here.
Of course.
Fixed routes and on demand, do you have numbers, like how many riders, your ridership on a fixed route in a year? Or I know you said you're on demand, 60% of which is Medicaid. What's the total ridership? Do you have any of those figures? So you may not have them today, but.
Yeah, so as a whole, we provide about 300,000 trips a year.
Okay.
A small portion of that is in our fixed routes. Typically, one of our fixed routes will service anywhere from 40 to 150 individuals a day.
Okay.
That is incredibly different from what they do in Burlington, where they'll do 300,000 in the course of a year. So ours are far less frequent, but we do use smaller buses. We constantly revise. We do our own deviations. So there's variations that make it efficient in its own way. But in the past 3 years, we've replaced a number of fixed routes. We've cut about half of our fixed route services, and we've replaced 2 other fixed routes with microtransit. Microtransit, the first under a pilot and the second under a strategic transfer, has created a lot more opportunities, and I think is a far better option for rural communities. The most recent example being Newport. Newport had a fixed route service that went between Newport and Derby. And if you're unfamiliar with transportation planning, typically the process is you evaluate census data, you look at primary, trip density. So you're looking at concentrated housing, whether it be assisted living facilities or affordable housing. In our region, it's quite often mobile home parks. You look at primary destinations. Those are often Walmarts or Dollar Generals, and hospitals. And then there's your fixed route. You find the hot spots and you run that fixed route between that. In a community like Newport, you have new services like emergency mental health facilities off the fixed route. You have small businesses off the fixed route because real estate tends to be higher priced along a fixed route. You have a number of services, of economic opportunities, all of that off the fixed route service. By replacing that with microtransit, which is an Uber-style transportation system, we made accessible the entire region. So individuals who may not have interest on anything along the fixed route, or maybe it didn't work for their schedule, they didn't want to be dependent on it, can now be picked up at their door and taken to the destination of their choosing. This has been a fascinating study. I often share that in the Morrisville case, which was also a fixed route that was replaced with microtransit, the fixed route was built off of the assumption that people would want to go to Price Chopper in the hospital, things like that. You can evaluate the data. Transportation, I think, is one of the most data-rich and maybe undermined areas of our communities. And all of a sudden, the top destinations became the courthouse. There's traditionally not transportation services for court. And you can imagine the implications that can have on kind of sequential compounding. It also became social settings. It became the hairstylists. It became hoagies. It became the local businesses. And it also became the local food co-op. When you gave people the choice, the agency to choose where their destination went, oftentimes local businesses rose to the top. So it's been a fascinating study. And I think the biggest case that makes a compelling argument for microtransit in rural areas is typically the Newport fixed route service consistently served 40 to 60 individuals who relied on it every day, use it for a number of things. We're currently at 1,200 unique individuals utilizing the microtransit service. So for a lower cost, I will say. So you're being able to impact a much wider audience of individuals, support local businesses, and yes, sir.
And then I have one last
Yeah.
question. Do you have any electric buses?
We do. Yep. So RCT, we currently operate 5 plug-in hybrid sedans or our RAV4s. And we also have 8 E-Transits within our system. We also were the recipient of the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, the federal program, to complete a study which evaluated the feasibility of electrifying our entire fleet, which I'm happy to share in more detail if you're interested, but it's a pretty extensive report. I'll jump to the conclusion. They said, don't do it yet. Currently our fleet runs 35 to 45 vehicles. In order to provide level service in the area that we serve, we would need about 140 E-Transit at about a 40% higher rate for vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
When you had said the cost, the total cost or lowered costs, you're not talking about the total lower cost, or is this a per mile, a per rider? When you said it was moved from the fixed route to the micro and obviously expanded, that's my second question, but when you said it was lowered cost, did you mean that in terms of the total amount that it costs to run it per ride? What were you measuring that cost? Was it a factor of mileage, passenger trip? What did you mean in that part?
So in our service area, the cost per ride, the cost per passenger, and the total cost are all lower. Where that becomes a little bit more fluid is in the total cost. Our analysis showed that we could service the Newport area with 2 vehicles. So we operate an ADA 12-passenger vehicle and a plug-in RAV4. We're finding that because of its popularity, that may not be sufficient, but we're serving significantly more people than the fixed route. So that was level funded, but the overall cost matrix or KPIs are lower.
So talked about how it went from, you're saying 40 to 60 people. Now you're saying you have 1,200 unique users. How did that word, how did that spread? How did that happen? How did people find it? If from 60 to 1,200, how did 1,140 new people get involved?
Yeah, so it is a community engagement process. We held public hearings. We went into all of the assisted living facilities. We worked with both Rural's Edge, which is the affordable housing provider. We went to the tourism sector. You know, we want people riding the Memphremagog rail trail to be able to call an RCT rides. All of them are outfitted with bike racks so we can take people to lunch downtown Newport. The intent of public transportation, one of the intents of public transportation in rural areas, in my belief, is to address externalities. You want to increase positive externalities by spreading economic impact, and you want to address negative externalities by reducing congestion, by allowing people to access critical services. So it was a really big outreach effort, but I believe a lot of it is organic. I mean, the need was there. We just didn't have the solution yet. And the fixed route, I think people knew about the services, but the fixed route wasn't addressing where they wanted to go or when they wanted to go there.
Thank you. What kind of timeline was that? That time frame to go from the 40 rides a day or 60 rides a day on the fixed route to what you're talking about today, these 1,200 users. What kind of timeline were that outreach, that transition? What was the timeline sort of? Did that happen in 18 months, 36 months?
So we officially launched the microtransit on July 1st, the first year of our fiscal year after receiving the VTrans grant. We ran the fixed route for an additional 2 months to give people a transitionary period. We in the Northeast Kingdom have the pleasure of getting to know our riders. So we made sure that those individuals who ride on fixed route transportation were comfortable with the system before we transitioned. So since July 1st, and now we're seeing about 300 to 400 trips a week provided by microtransit.
That's in a year, then, is that what you're saying? So fiscal year of last year, year before?
So we're at 8 months.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't do this very often, but so if that plan of somewhere were to go into a different area, how does it, if you don't have the advantage of already being in the territory, what's the biggest challenge and difference between offering services like that somewhere else versus where you're already operating? In other words, if you wanted to replicate that, what's the biggest challenge to replicating that success in an area that you're not already established in, that you don't have those community ties already, that you don't have that background? What's the biggest challenge in the area?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge would be addressing the individuals who are dependent on the fixed route, right? People value the thing they have more than a new thing, and make sure that in transitioning services, we weren't leaving individuals who had depended on the fixed route service. So we had the luxury of knowing all the individuals who regularly rode with us, and were able to do that. So that would be a large learning process. We also had the benefit of 2 state supported studies that were able to assist us with a data analysis to understand how many vehicles we needed for a comparable service. The interesting thing is that I think there's an opportunity for Vermont to embrace this on a experimental level. The way our software works is it's a lot, if you're familiar with Uber, a vehicle, the driver decides, all right, I'll give rides, turns it on, and it's available. You have that ability with microtransit to flex the hours and introduce vehicles into regions that may not have historically had services. So I think the barrier to entry is very low. I think adaptation takes a little bit of time for those who were relying on the service, but I've seen that adoption of microtransit is pretty organic and can be done very quickly. So the actual lift of opening services is very low. And I'll share that we've actually been working with VTrans with microtransit as a solution for possible construction projects. So if regular transportation services are disrupted through the replacement of a bridge, for instance, can we temporarily activate a microtransit service for the 3 months of construction to make sure that those who have been cut off from resources are able to receive those during that time period? So in that case, it is a very expedited time period. It's a matter of building the service area within the software, and then just a public promotion campaign to let people know that that is available. And I think that's a lot easier when you have a fixed service area, because you know the population that you're reaching out to.
Okay. 100% wow.
So do you, you're mentioning, it sounds like you use like an AI program to help with some of this. Is that something that is unique to your company, or is that something like does everybody at VTrans use it, or how this sounds very thoughtful, intentional, and strategic, and I'm just kind of wondering if this is something that the other providers are also using.
Yeah, and I commend you. You identified one of the most exciting parts of microtransit is that it is all AI dispatched, which is a learning process for both our drivers, our staff, and our riders, because the AI dispatches based off of probability of trip. So if I'm going between here and the co-op, it may take me on a different road than I'm used to driving, but it's because it knows that if the vehicle goes along here, there's a higher probability of picking up another person. So you're gaining efficiencies. It also has the potential to address some of the challenges. I mean, right now, most of our Medicaid on-demand trips require a 48-hour notice because we get about 1,000 requests a day. We're able to service about 800 of those, and it takes our team of phenomenal dispatchers a lot of time to process through how to use our vehicles, our volunteers, and provide as many trips as possible. The AI can do a lot of that. We are not unique in that. I will say ourselves and Green Mountain Express are the two that went with a software package that is extremely low barrier. You can pull up an app. Any one of you could pull up our app if you're in one of our service areas, pull up the app, give us any name you want, and we'll come and pick you up within minutes. Some other microtransit platforms, Go Ride right here in Montpelier, the barrier to actually getting from interest in ride to ride is significant, and that's more of a software issue. I'm extremely pleased with the platform we use. I find it to be extremely customer centric, and the AI dispatching has served us very well. But the biggest challenge of that is working with drivers who have lived in regions for all their lives and say, that's not how you get there. And it's also a challenge to, if there's an efficiency where, let's say you're riding with us from here to Walmart in Newport. It may say, well, we're going to go beyond Walmart, pick up this person and come back and drop you off because that's how we're going to give the most rides. So it can be frustrating from a rider perspective, but we set thresholds on how long you can be on that, how much deviation you can have. And the goal is to give as many rides as we possibly can for the money that all of you are generous enough to provide our region.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, a couple questions. One, did you start out with an MTI grant?
No, that was part of the original pilot. The Morrisville one came in through a congestion mitigation and air quality. I will say one of the motivating factors for the Newport transition is that the fixed route was funded through 5311, which is 50 federal, 50 state or local. CMAQ funding is 80% federal. So it was far more efficient for the state for us to kind of re-envision how we can provide that service.
Very impressive. What you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I just want to ask one more question. You mentioned, you said something about education. And as we're discussing revamping the education system, do you have concerns about how that's going to impact transportation if kids are, being spread out in different schools, things like that? And just bringing it up because it's just a little thing to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I'll answer that in two parts if that's okay. The first being that ourselves, as along with other transportation providers, are not new to providing or supporting the education system. Prior to COVID, we had contracts with Essex Regional School District to provide transportation for individuals, either midday for specialized education services, or individuals who lived in an area, which is a lot of areas in our service area, that didn't make sense on the big yellow bus service routes. We also currently see a lot of student transportation on our fixed routes for some of our independent schools. So you have students from Good Shepherd who get on the Route 100 commuter and get off at the Town Hall of Stowe. You have a lot of students from our region who will drive from Hardwick to Danville to hop on the Route 2 to go into St. Johnsbury Academy. So you have a lot of that utilization. I think the important note is that often, and forgive me for a little bit of soapboxing here, but oftentimes the transportation costs are externalized and not considered. You see this frequently with land use. It's cheaper for an organization to purchase a cheaper piece of property and have us be responsible for figuring out how to transport people. So that becomes our financial burden, or externalizes from whether it be social services or medical services. You see that both on the private side as well as the public side. Pharmacies close because it's a good business decision. We're now driving everyone from Hardwick to Lyndonville, enormous cost to us. My fear is that if we don't inject transportation into the education, that we'll end up carrying the burden of those externalized costs. So we do provide that. I just want us to have a kind of thoughtful discussion of what the potential impacts on the transportation providers could be.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Thanks for coming. This is very helpful. And
Yeah.
it sort of fits in with what we've already heard from Ross McDowell and other groups. You mentioned the challenges for some riders who, are challenged themselves. There's a bill now in judiciary on treating an assault of a driver similar to other sort of, not a special category, but into that category. Are you familiar with that bill?
I am.
And I know Green Mountain Transit supports it. Is that supported through Vermont? Vermont Public Transportation Association?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we're all in support of that. Protecting our drivers is primary. My critique of it is that it narrowly defines assault to the physical nature. The challenges we run into, and this is for all of your consideration, is the ambiguity of no trespassing on public transportation. Depending on the assistant state's attorney, depending on the police, the sheriff, it is a complete patchwork for when a person violates our terms of ridership. I'll give you an example. In Morrisville, we had a passenger who was on the bus at the same time of a number of Good Shepherd students, became irate, took out a ski pole, not a skier, important distinction, and started striking the bus with a ski pole. In order to prevent him from continuing to display this disruptive behavior, we had to file no trespasses in Stowe and Morrisville, each of which are on different time frames, neither of which were likely to be enforced because there is some kind of legal ambiguity between whether you can no trespass a transit vehicle because it's not physical property. And so depending on the state's attorney, depending on I think if we're prioritizing protecting drivers, addressing the no trespass in public transportation and expanding the definition of assault would be the ultimate solution. But of course, I support the bill as an incremental step.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to pay attention to that. Number two, we've heard about the challenge of getting volunteer drivers. And I assume you're also challenged in getting a number of volunteer drivers to do your Medicaid, primarily transportation. Does the VPTA have policy suggestions or anything that might enhance volunteer drivers or make that easier to get more volunteers, I guess?
I appreciate that. And I will share that historically, RCT has been the example for volunteer inclusion. On any given day, if we're giving 800 rides, 600 of those are done by volunteers. Prior to COVID, we had over 90 volunteers. We're now at anywhere between 50 and 60. I would say that one of the attributing factors to that success is the distance between our dispersed population and the locations, because if you're reimbursing people by mileage, we're a very appealing place to be. I think the other thing that I've found, an important transition in my mind is that the way our volunteer program works is that many individuals see it as a source of income. It is a reimbursement structure, but you can put miles on your car and receive the check, and it doesn't impact benefits. So we've had enormous success in Legion Halls. Statistically, across the nation, the largest population of transportation volunteers are veterans between 65 and 85. We have a large population of that in our region. So a lot of it is luck of area, but I think it is an opportunity for all of us. And the state has launched some really successful marketing campaigns, which I've seen some responsive growth in volunteers because of those marketing campaigns. But so much of it is built on reputation. When I first started 2 years ago, we were struggling with volunteers. One of the first things we did was start letting volunteers go. Disassociating, because they're not employees, you don't fire them. But if passengers are uncomfortable, if they're driving recklessly, let them go. And we saw a huge increase in volunteerism after that, because I think people want to be associated with the organization. They want to give back to their community, but they also want to be associated with a program that I think has a good service and reputation to the community.
Yeah, one very
This
brief
one's
one.
got to be a quick one.
Do you use micro transit for Medicaid?
We do, yes.
Okay, so that was that 80% volunteers and then the rest could be micro or.
Conceptually, microtransit is not always the best solution because it is a competitive resource. Medicaid transportation often requires that individual to have a dedicated person pick them up, make sure they're at their appointment, and wait for them and make sure there's not complications with dialysis and then get them home. So
Okay.
it is a bit more complex than microtransit affords, but.
All right, thank you very much.
Caleb, thank you very much for your testimony. There's obviously a lot of interest within the committee on where you're at and all the information that you delivered. So we really appreciate you coming in. If you're sticking around for a few minutes, that would be great.
Yeah.
And to all the committee members, thank you for all your input today and for the sponsors of that bill. Thank you for your flexibility. We're back. Enjoy your time and with your constituents over town meeting break. And we will see you all back the following Tuesday to pick up the T-bill and move it forward from there.